evening, everybody. Welcome to Delta Power Sports. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Trevor Grams. I work for the Alaska Avalanche Information Center, and I'm here on behalf of the Eastern Alaska Range Avalanche Center, which is the Fairbanks offshoot of the Alaska Avalanche Information Center. I'd like to give a big thanks to Delta Power Sports, specifically Olivia and Josh for setting this up. They really did a good job coming and approaching us and getting this class going. So just to start things off, how many people are mountain riders in the crowd here? Have summits, mountain machines? All right, over half. How many people are on wide tracks, trail machines, wood haulers, fur hat crowd? Is there any fur hat crowd guys here? No, pretty slim on that. Most people ride in Summit, Petersville, Summit. Yeah, Summit's good. How many people have seen an avalanche or been involved in an avalanche? Show of hands. Summit area. Anybody been caught? Caught in an avalanche? One? Not too many. That's good. That's good. So my name is Trevor Grams. I grew up down in Glen Allen, down south there. I've ridden snow machines since I could walk. I'm really into accessing the mountains on the snow machine to ski big ski lines. I also really like going winter camping from snow machines. I've done several week-long Arctic Oven trips on the glaciers. I usually put on over 1,000 miles a year, running out to ski snowboard lines and doing camping trips to ski the best snow. I also work as a commercial fisherman, and I just recently got a job on the Bell M. Shimada, a fisheries research vessel out of Oregon. So I'll be going down there. I have a real long PowerPoint for tonight. I'd really like this to be interactive. I'd like to have you guys ask me questions. I have slides all night long, but it gets way more interesting if you guys ask questions and engage. So we're going to start by talking about some statistics, avalanche statistics, talk about avalanche terrain, the equipment you need to carry, some avalanche anatomy, something we call the avalanche triangle, kind of a lot of things that come together to make avalanches. Then we're going to talk about some red flags, and I also got a lot of pictures thrown in for application. We're going to look at some pictures and see if you guys can figure out what maybe the safest route is or how to assess specific avalanche terrain. So why is avalanche safety important? It's important because it kills people. Avalanches kill people every year. This is a graph of avalanche fatalities by year. You can see most recently in 2016 there's 29 fatalities in the US. Specifically in Alaska, this is a breakdown of the historic avalanche deaths. We got 15 skiers and 17 climbers, and snow machiners are the biggest percentage of pie there by quite a bit between 1998 and 2016. There's been several additional deaths added onto that between the Blackstone avalanche and a couple other that have happened in the past couple years since 2016. Avalanches come in all sizes. This is the Damalanche. Did anyone see this down near Valdez a few years ago? Huge, huge avalanche that ran 4,000 vertical feet and left 70 feet of snow piled up on the road through Keystone Canyon there. It backed the low river up. It flattened the guardrail completely flat up against the pavement, completely flat.
What causes it like that? Does it just happen? Or?
So that was caused by a really special set of weather events. So what had happened is it snowed. There was a huge, huge storm. It snowed, I think 8 or 9 feet up at the higher elevations. And then it got super warm and it rained all the way up to the peak. And with that rain, that put a lot of extra weight on the snow, and then it was able to all go at once and come down the entire mountain. And this is a real small avalanche. This was a couple years ago at Arctic Man. This is me and my friend Kyle Sobek going out. This guy we determined that he'd ridden over the debris and gotten wrapped up in his snow machine, and he got sucked up into the track of his machine. We recovered the body here. So avalanches can have all sorts of dangers, from the debris to the stuff that it can carry you over. So what is avalanche terrain? Does anybody have any ideas on what avalanche terrain actually is? Do you have a definition for avalanche terrain? What are some things that you might need to make an avalanche? Yeah, you need some snow, the steep incline. Snow and steep incline is the #1 thing. If you don't have a slope, you can't have an avalanche. So there's actually an incredible correlation between slope angle and the probability of an avalanche. Your sweet spot between 35 and 40 degrees, that's where the majority of avalanches happen. When you're ramping up to that steepness, you have to have a lot more special snowpack to slide on those low angles, and it's really unlikely. And then the opposite happens when you get too steep. So when you get too steep, the snow just kind of sloughs off the slopes on its own, and you don't get these big, large avalanches that are deadly. So avalanche terrain, you enter avalanche terrain anytime you're within the run out of an avalanche slope. So even if you're on flat ground, you can still be in avalanche terrain. If you're traveling up the valley bottom, those slopes on either side can come down and avalanche on you. The way that you tell whether you're in avalanche terrain or not is this fancy alpha angle. And basically what that is it's the angle from you to the top of the avalanche slope, or the top of the peak. So if you sight it up and it's greater than 19 degrees, that means you're in avalanche terrain. So theoretically, if it's a 19-degree angle, the snow can slide off that face and come all the way out across the flat ground, all the way to you. So the slope angle. The slope angle is key. Has anyone ever measured a slope angle before?
You use a clinometer.
Yeah, you need a clinometer. Does anyone carry a clinometer with them when they ride? Clinometers are these really cool little tools that you hold up to the slope, and you can judge the angle by looking at the side. Clinometers are in compasses. A lot of good compasses have them. There's a lot of good phone apps that have them. The BCA app has it, and you just hold your phone up to the slope, match the angle to the slope, and you got your slope angle. And then that can essentially tell you the probability of the avalanche just based on the slope angle. You don't even need to know anything about the snow. So you can use a clinometer by holding it up to the side of the slope like this and measuring a slope from the side. And also, if you're at the bottom of the slope, you can sight up the top of your compass or your smartphone, and you can get a slope angle from there. Have your buddy read it or click the record button, and it'll get you a slope angle. You can also figure out the slope angle with some fancy mapping stuff. This is hillmap.com, and you can put layers on to see the yellow is greater than 20 degrees, red is that sweet 30 to 40 degrees, 30 to 40 degrees, and then the purple and black is steeper than 40 degrees. So as you can see, the slope angle is really key. And even the smaller slopes, like down here Gun Creek, the steep sides there, those are steep enough to avalanche. Even though they're small slopes, they can still produce an avalanche just because of their slope angle. It has nothing to do with the size. It's all about slope angle. So slab avalanches are the types of avalanches that we're really concerned about. You need 4 things to make a slab avalanche happen. You need, number 1, a weak layer in the snow, a bed surface in the snow, a slab, and a trigger. In other avalanche classes, we go into this a lot more on the snow setup and exactly what makes these layers. But all that you need to know is if you have a hard layer on top of a not hard layer, that's a recipe for disaster. And the way you can tell that is if you're riding along and you get this punchy snow, your track keeps coming down, or you're riding along and all of a sudden you're trenching really deep, that's a sure sign that you have a hardware layer over a soft layer. And definitely need to be alert. So what do you think are some triggers, some things that can kick avalanches off?
Side hilling.
Yeah, side hilling, vibration.
High marking.
High marking. Vibration is kind of debatable. Sound, so there's a big myth that sound triggers avalanches. That only happens in the movies. But what can happen is it's called remote trigger. This is why a lot of people think it's sound, because you remote trigger an avalanche. So when you're riding along the snow, has anyone seen the snow collapse around them? You're riding along? So that collapse can carry for miles up a valley. And that can carry from flat ground into your 30-degree slopes. And then that's what's creating these remote triggered avalanches that some people think is sound. So what are some other things that you think can trigger? You got earthquakes. There's a couple other key things I'm looking for.
Would warm weather do it?
That's one of them, exactly, yeah. Warm weather, when you get the sun hitting a slope, that's warming up the snow, and it makes the snow settle and get wet and more heavy, and then that triggers it. So that's why these south-facing slopes, especially in the spring, when the sun comes around and hits these south-facing slopes, that's what's triggering all the south-facing slopes, is the increasing temperature because of the increased load. So kind of some slab avalanche anatomy so that we know what we're talking about here. So you have the crown is the break on the top of the avalanche that comes along across the top. Then you have the flanks on the side. The bed surface, which is typically a hard layer like a rain crust or a real hard wind-blown snow surface. That's usually what these avalanches are running on. Then you got this fancy word, the staunch wall down here, which is just a fancy way for the lower break where the slab pops off the slope. And then of course you got your debris pile down below. So there's a lot of different types of avalanches. We have loose snow avalanches, slab avalanches, and then there's some other things, cornices and these things called glide cracks are also an avalanche concern. And I'm gonna go through these pretty quick. So you have loose dry snow, just real gentle sloughs. They're not super dangerous. Loose wet snow. This is at Arctic Man a couple years ago. Most of these were triggered by people high marking, and these are just real slow moving point releases that come down. They're slow and they're easy to get away from, but the risk is if you get caught in a wet avalanche, it's so much more heavy and wet. You can't breathe in it at all, even less than the dry snow, and it sets up even harder than cement. The wind slab avalanches are some of the more common ones in the Eastern Alaska Range, or the Summit Hoodoo area. And as you can probably guess, they're formed by wind. When the wind blows across a ridge, it scours and deposits snow. So I want to talk a little bit about wind slab avalanches because I think they're really important. These are the types of avalanches that get a lot of people because they're in pockets. They're not all over the place. And it's also relatively easy to get an eye for it, to see where the snow is stacking up. You see this a lot on Rainbow Ridge. When the snow blows, you know, that's always a north-south wind in there, and then it deposits snow in those guts. That's cross-loading from the wind blowing parallel to the slope. And then you have top-loading, when the wind comes over the top of the ridge and builds up a cornice on the other side. And more importantly, you have this pillow of snow down here. And this pillow is a really likely place for an avalanche to happen. You got a storm slab, that's just right after a big storm. It's pretty likely for slopes to avalanche. And then wet slabs are in the springtime when things start actually propagating out on that real mashed potato type snow. The persistent and deep slab are these weak layers that just set way down low in the snow. These are actually fairly common in the Alaska Range because it's so cold, just because the temperatures are so low during the early winter. It sets up a bad snowpack for these. So these are fairly common in the Alaska Range. We got cornices here too. So a lot of people think that if you're standing above the rock, you're pretty safe, but if you think about it, there's all this weight over here that's actually going to cantilever out. So it's likely that it's going to break at like a 45-degree angle back from the rock outcropping, and possible to break like 30 degrees out. So what you want to be is level with the rock on the other side. And you definitely don't want to be out here. That's not a good place. One thing that you need to be concerned about cornices, about being under, is a lot of times they're triggered by the sun too. When the sun comes around and hits these cornices, that's when they're most likely to drop, or when they're actively being loaded, when you see the snow coming over and you can see them being built. But they can drop and fall on the pillow that I was talking about, this right down here, and then that'll create a big slab avalanche, which is even more concerning than if you're not worried about a bus-sized cornice rolling down the hill yet. You might be concerned about the slab avalanche. Glide cracks. Has anyone ever seen a glide crack in the Alaska Range? They look kind of like this. It's basically like the snow just kind of starts creeping down a hillside. They're fairly common down in like the Chugach and the warmer Juneau, the warmer areas. Never seen one? I haven't either. I haven't seen one in the Alaska Range. But if you ride down south, how many people ride down the Chugach? Maybe down the Chugach very often. A couple every once in a while. You'll see these more often. And basically, these release with absolutely no warning. There's been a ton of research done on these, and they're actually a huge problem for Alyeska Ski Resort because they never know when they're going to release. They go and pack these things with dynamite and blow all this dynamite off in them, and they don't move, and then the next day they'll just go off, and they release into a full-size avalanche. So in summary, we got a bunch of different avalanche types. Anybody have any questions on these? How about we have someone give a prize? Let's give a door prize away here. A couple of those. Who's up for that?
Okay. Sorry if I butchered this. FICO buffer. There's karaoke here after that.
So that means that's a huge characteristic of wind loading. It's not even across all the slopes. You got to really work and get an eye for how the wind is depositing the snow across the slopes. So you're more likely to trigger a wind slab avalanche when you hit the thin spots over here. So when he probably crossed right here, that was probably when he hit an area that it was thin enough that his energy traveled through the weak layer and then sent the whole thing off. If you're dealing with a weak layer that's 10 feet deep, even the weight of a snow machine on top of that, it's going to be really hard to trigger that. It's going to take a lot more energy to trigger, but it's going to propagate and go across the slope a lot farther. So the first thing you're going to do is yell avalanche, and that sounds like kind of a goofy thing to do, but it's really important to at least try and get everybody around you to know what's going on. And if you see an avalanche, especially if you have radios, you need to mic into that radio and go avalanche, 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 and get everybody alert that's what's going on. You're going to want to try and grab onto anything you can get. You can grab onto a rock, grab onto trees, punch your hands into the base as hard as you can. I personally have held onto a rock in the middle of one and was able to ride out on a rock. It was terrifying, but you wouldn't believe how strong you can get when you got snow piling past you.
Get off your machine?
So then that's a big debate, whether you get off your machine or stay on your machine. And a lot of it depends on how fast your machine's going, how good of a rider you are. There's a lot going on there. So if you're going straight up the slope and it pops, it's probably better to just pin it and hope that you can shoot above the debris that's coming on. If you're turning out of your high mark and you have almost no snow speed, or no speed over the ground, you're going to want to ditch your sled, boom, and shoot uphill of your snow machine. And if you're kind of cutting a side hill, you maybe want to pick like 45 degrees left or 45 degrees right, and just full throttle out of it. If you get turned downhill in the avalanche debris, there's a chance that you can throttle out of it. These new snow machines go fast enough that if you get on the throttle, you can ride out of it. But what happens is that staunch wall, the place where the bottom of the slab is, the snow starts shooting up right there. And so when you start going full throttle down this hill and you hit that staunch wall, that's why you see in these videos all of a sudden the snow machine just goes straight up in the air and they get thrown back and there's this huge backflip and it's nasty. You're going to want to decide if you're going to want to pull your airbag or pull your Avalanche. When I was talking to Uncle Dan there about riding out, he famously rode out of that Avalanche. He was full throttle in a side hill. He wasn't going to pull his airbag because that might blow him off the machine. You pretty much want to save your airbag until after you get separated from your machine, or use that as a tool to help push you away from your machine. So then, yeah, decide if you're going to ditch your machine. They say you can do a swimming motion, try and just swim to the top of it. And then at the last minute, when you feel the debris kind of slowing down, you want to make some sort of air pocket around your face. And snow machine helmets are good because they do have an air pocket there, but that could definitely get filled with snow. But you want to try and bring your hands around your face or tuck your helmet into your chin if you can, and then shoot your hand or your leg or something towards the surface so that maybe somebody can see that. So then if you're the rescuer, you're not going to go for help. You are the help. So you better have your gear dialed, be ready to roll. You need to establish a last scene point. Hopefully when you're high marking on that slope, you had somebody at the bottom who had eyes on you the whole entire time. They were back at a safe spot, watching you hill climb up and saw you go down. And then that's where you can start your search from, is that last scene point. You want to get a head count after you see an avalanche go off. Make sure you actually have everybody in your group. Maybe somebody got caught and you didn't even notice. Especially if you're riding in a big group, like 6 or 8 people, all of a sudden it can be this huge mess of people running around and you miss that somebody actually got caught in it. And the last thing you want to consider is whether there's hang fire above. And hang fire is like other chunks of snow that could also avalanche that are still hanging up there. It's not, the avalanches don't always go all the way across and come cleanly off the slope. Sometimes you'll just have half the slope ripped off And if you touch this half, it's also going to rip. So if you represent all the people who got caught in an avalanche, 25% of you are going to die right away, just based on trauma. So timing is critical after an avalanche. You need to be on time to do it. If you get somebody within 10 minutes, the odds are really high. You want to have your beacon skills dialed so you get to them within 10 minutes. After 15 minutes, your odds are going to go down to 80%. So you force it down. You died of asphyxiation because your friends didn't make it fast enough. So now you guys are all that's left after 15 minutes. After 20 minutes, it comes down to about 40%. So can I have, I'll have about 5 of you guys sit down. Now if you look around after 20 minutes, this is all the people that kind of have a chance after 20 minutes. And 20 minutes is like, think about that, 20 minutes. How long does it take you to walk 500 feet up a slope? You're out of breath. That takes some time. How long does it take for you to fumble your beacon out, get your beacon going, remember how to switch it to search? Everyone else can sit down if you haven't already. Switch your beacon to search, do the find search, get your probe out, find a probe. It's real famous for people to pull their probe out, set it down, and it goes zipping down the mountainside. You lose your probe, and all of a sudden that's a problem. And then the thing that takes the longest is the shoveling, though. Once you actually probe somebody, shoveling is actually what takes the longest part during an avalanche rescue. So, what you need for avalanche equipment, most basic, you need a beacon, a shovel, and a probe. That's the most basic avalanche equipment. I have the Tracker 3 beacon. I'm a really big fan of it. Some things you need to consider when you're buying a beacon. The newer beacons are 3 antenna beacons. So anything like the Tracker 2, Tracker 3, most of the Peeps beacons, the 3-axis antennas give you that full range on all directions. The other thing about these beacons is they do a lot better with multiple burial stuff, and they have better battery life, and they're kind of generally easier to use. So you want to look for a 3 antenna beacon. You need to use only alkaline batteries in them. And the reason that is because other batteries, when they lose their charge, the lithium-ion batteries, it's just like in your drill, when, that thing will go real good until all of a sudden it's dead, and boom, and then it's totally dead. And so the battery meter on these can't actually track that. So it'll show you got 99, 98% all the way until it dies. You want to keep your beacon battery life above 60%, and I usually just like to run above 80%. And the reason that is because if you get caught in an avalanche and the conditions are too nasty to come dig you out, your beacon needs to last a couple days. There was a guy in Hatcher Pass who got caught in an avalanche, and they weren't able to get him out for several days because the weather closed in, the avalanche danger was too high, and his beacon had died by then. So it was a real project finding his body in the avalanche. Another consideration with these beacons is they get interference. So other electronics will interfere with these, and it reduces the range. They do really good when they're in transmit mode, which is when it's sending a signal. The range stays about the same, but when you switch to search mode, it can basically shield this beacon from receiving a signal, and it's completely different for all electronics. I've done a lot of testing with smartphones. I happen to know my phone I've tested, and I know that I can have my phone in my pocket here and my beacon out here, and it doesn't influence it whatsoever. I've also used different Tracker 3s that have been influenced by this phone. So you just have to test it with your own gear. So phones are a big one. If you keep your phone in your chest pocket, that's going to interfere when you go into search mode. I usually keep my phone in my glove box on my sled, and that way it's just totally out of the way. Your GoPros with Bluetooth can interfere with it. Running snow machines interfere with it. It's the electrical energy in your stator can get in the way of that. And we've done tests on that, and if you're standing on your snow machine, it'll definitely interfere with it. On this one, I've been able to hold it up like this and get my full range, but it all depends on the snow machine. It basically depends on the size of the stator and how much electrical currents run through your snow machine and how far away you can get your beacon from it. So it's well worth your time to take your beacon out, have your snow machine on, and check how much interference you're getting with it. Can I get someone to come up and help me do a beacon demo? So what we're going to do, I'm going to run through the startup. So when you turn this beacon on, it starts up. All the lights are going to come on. Flashes the battery life, 76%. that means this beacon's good to go. And then you get a blinking red light down here, and that's on all the time. So this is sending a signal. And then when I switch to search, it makes a fancy noise, and then boom, I've got numbers. These numbers are in meters, the distance to that one. So can you go stand over there, kind of as far as you can?
Meters?
It's in meters, not feet. Yeah.
Y'all want me searching for you?
Hopefully you can count by threes. So here you go. I'm gonna give you this. So if you want to just walk in, so the arrows. So right now this arrow on the beacon is pointing over this direction. So can you? The first thing you're gonna do is align it. Boom. So there he's got the arrows pointing dead forward. And then follow in. What's the number say?
4.8, 4.9,
Yeah. Keep following.
6.2. It's moving around.
It's probably bouncing around in here a lot because the lights and
Yeah.
we got a lot of electronics. So then the beeping gets louder as you get closer, beeping gets louder, and then it's going to get real intense. Thanks. So that's the course search. And the course search, so you're coming in on the magnetic flux lines. This is the signal that the beacon's emitting. So that's why he's coming in at a curved angle. It's almost never going to lead you straight in. You're going to walk in at this angle, boom, 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 turn, come in. Now it's not picking it up. And then what you're going to do is, once you come over the beacon, you're going to get down on your hands and knees, and you're going to switch to the find search. And what you're doing at the find search is trying to figure out that place to probe. It's really important to keep the beacon level and square. You need to essentially pick a plane to keep that on. So if you've got like a 15-degree slope, you're going to keep your beacon at a 15-degree angle, and you're going to move it down the slope at a 15-degree angle. And the arrows are going to go all over the place at that point. You don't follow your arrows less than 6 meters. So you're going to come up, slow, and then your numbers are going to increase, and you're going to go a little bit past it. Like right here, I'd probably be at 1.2, and go 1.3, and then I'm going to draw a line in the snow with my hand. And I'm going to come back, 1.2, 1.1, 1.0, 1.1, 1.2. Okay, so then you have this X in this direction, and then you come back to that 1.0 section, 1.0 right there, and then you're going to move to the left. And it might get smaller, it might get bigger. If it goes 1.0, 1.2, okay, that's the left border, and then you're going to come to the right. 1.0, 0.9, 1.0, okay, then there's your right, and you're going to say probe here at the 0.9. So you got your X and your Y. While you're doing that, hopefully you got a buddy, and you're going to say, hey, get your probe out. You're going to need a probe here pretty soon. The way you get a probe out, take it out, and then you just whip it to the side, and stick it, it should come together real quick. All right, so if my slope is this direction, how am I going to probe it? Like this, or am I going to probe it at angle in? Yeah, nailed it. Why is that? Yeah, since you did your find search on an angle, yeah, you have to probe perpendicular to that plane that you did your find search on. So you're going to probe in like that, 10 inches apart from each other, and you come out in circles. Does anyone know why 10 inches is such a magic number? It's not a magic number. 10 inches is about how big your chest is. So ideally, if someone, or not ideally, in the worst case scenario, somebody's going to be laying on their side in the snow, and you need to probe in a shorter pattern than is going to, miss their chest here, and then just miss their back. So if you're probing for a bigger guy, you could probably stretch it out to 15 inches. It all depends. Has anyone tried the snow machine across avalanche debris? How'd it go?
Rougher than Bob.
Yeah.
Super hard?
Doesn't work.
Really?
Doesn't work.
Oh,
All right, so the way that you set a beacon search up, you want to do it in a meticulous way so that you cover all the ground, either from the last scene point, or if you don't have the last scene point, you need to cover the whole avalanche. And you need to set your people up depending on how many people you have and how deep the avalanche debris is. That depends on how far out people are spaced. It depends on if people are going to do a pattern through. So the bottom line is that you need to figure that your beacon range is 15 meters, assuming that somebody in the group has one of these beacons that doesn't have as big of a range.
So if you're caught in one, you say tuck your chin.
Yeah.
Do you lay still or do you try to dig yourself out?
Yeah, you can try to dig yourself out. Absolutely try to dig yourself
It
out.
won't cause it to come down harder on you?
Probably not.
Probably, I like that.
Probably not.
So try
Yeah.
to get out. Go
Yeah.
wiggle and move and do whatever you can to try to get out.
Yeah, so you need to weigh the pros and cons. You want to wiggle and try and get out, but also you want to conserve your air. If you get caught and you get in a panic and start breathing all your air and your face is stuck in the snow, what happens is it ices over. You can actually breathe through if you have dry snow, you can breathe through that for quite a while, and that's why you have these long rescue times. That's why people can live like 30, 40 minutes underneath the snow, is because they stay calm and they're in dry snow, which has a lot of air. But if you get hyperventilating, this ice lens forms around your face from the snow melting, and it's not immediately close. It's like out about 6 or 8 inches. And then when that ice lens closes in, that's when you suffocate. Yeah, in the West Range, this is it. It's like you maybe call your buddies. Growing up in Glen Allen, I always had, if I was a call for help, I would call my dad, and then he would round a crew up of the local people to go out, because they're, you never know who you're getting with the state troopers, but if you have friends, call them up, because then you know who you're getting. You can get people who know the area.
Get there.
But what needs to happen is that when an avalanche happens, you need to come together at the bottom, and you need to make a plan. Everybody can't just run up there, it's just gonna be a disaster. You need to come together, and somebody kind of needs to take initiative, take charge of the group, and you need to develop a plan down there. Go, okay, everybody switch your beacons to search, and then the leader visually checks, okay, you're in search, you're in search, you're in search, you're in search. And then you go, okay, you go up here, and you go around here, and we're gonna meet on the last scene point. The last scene point was right there below the right-hand crown. You're gonna converge on that point. And then that's why radios are really helpful for that too, because then the guy who's sitting back, he can give radio signals. And, if he all of a sudden he sees a hand right here, he's sitting here looking, he's like, oh, there's a hand over to your right. Whoever moved to your right, go get them. I'm a huge fan of having radios out in the snow. How many of you guys ride with radios? That's awesome. Yeah, radios are an incredible tool. So it becomes way more complicated to search for 2 people, because you'll pick up 2 signals, and that's another reason to have one of these newer beacons. So my Tractor 3 here, what it'll do when I pick up multiple signals is it'll start flashing. So I'll get a number. If I'm standing here, it'll be like 25, and it'll point that way, and then it'll go 36, and it'll point that way. And then it flashes back and forth, 25, 36, 25, 36. So then there's a lot of techniques for finding multiple burials, and that's like, you spend all day doing that.
I just wondered if it would, and 2 people, if it would pick up both of them.
Yeah, it picks them both up. And then there's also, it's called signal suppression on here, is when you get close and you go, okay, you get your find search done, probe here, then you can push signal suppression, and it'll go to the other, it'll automatically lock on the other one. But it's different with every beacon. You got to read your beacon manual. You got to know your beacon well and how to use those features, because it's tough. I mean, even when you watch the videos online and then you go out and try and do it, it is not easy. And then if you have added pressure,
you don't know what you get.
Yeah, if you want to keep it simple, I would just go Tractor 3. It's really popular. A lot of people have it, and it's just good. The other popular one is the Peeps. The Peeps beacons are really good. I mean, all of them are good. All of them are going to do the job. All right, anybody have any ideas on what the most efficient way to shovel is? Yeah, you nailed it. Like a dog, we call it paddle in the canoe. Paddle in the canoe, yeah. You want to dig like that. And so then when you get multiple people in a group, you want to set up a triangle. So here you're going to be at the head. We'll do the same slope coming down this way. So he's got a probe strike down here. You're going to be at the head. You're going to be on one knee down there, ready to canoe. And then both you guys are going to be kind of flanking back on him like this. And it's his job, both down, bent down one knee, like you got your shovel in your hand there. Come on, come on. You got to earn this $25 gift card. You think it's going to come easy? So then he's busting snow in the front. He's busting in the front. And then you guys are just continuing to push downhill. So they, yeah, just like swim and swim and swim and swim and swim and push, push, push as fast as you can. Just as much snow as you can. And your guys' job is to make sure that he's moving snow downhill. Once you start getting into a hole, you're not gonna be able to like throw the snow up. It's just gonna all fall all over the place. So you need to be pushing snow downhill the whole time. One thing that's really common with probes is they get all bent up like this and the cable gets kinked. So like every couple weeks, every couple rides, it's really good to throw your probe out and deploy it, because what happens a lot of times is you throw it out, pull this cable and the cable will break and then you have no probe. So I've got these handy papers up here if anyone wants any of these. This is a good summary of it's designed to be on a card that I typically carry this in my backpack. I have a copy in my backpack and a copy in my glove box in my car. And if I'm riding with new people, I'll pull this sheet out and we'll run through this in the car. Talk about 15 meters between your search distance. This is just a really good run through of how to do your find search, how to probe, your shovel depth. And we'll review that right in the truck or in the parking lot before we even get on the snow. So if you guys want some copies, I got plenty up here. All right, so this is kind of my first aid survival kit. I have a little Soul stove in here to make water if somebody gets hurt. I got a survival blanket, some candles, some matches. Got a first aid kit here with a ski strap on it. These things are just really handy. My spare duct tape. Got extra food. I always carry extra food with me. That's very important. This is also for betting on slope angles. This is my BCA radio. I'm really happy to hear most of you guys are riding with radios. These are awesome. This is just cord that I made myself. If you take a cord and tie knots in it, it's a snow saw. And I use this for when I dig pits or also when I break things. I have some extra cord. Here's my extra beacon, another ski strap. I like to keep lots of these. They're just good for all kinds of stuff. Got an inReach. How many people use inReaches? Yeah, a few. These things are awesome. I'm really impressed with these and how they work. I would highly recommend them. You pay like a monthly fee. These are pretty cheap. I mean, I think it's like $200 or $300 for one of these, and then you pay like $20 a month for a subscription, and it works really good. I've never had a problem getting a signal and sending a message. I always carry binoculars also for scoping ski lines and sizing up avalanche slopes. Got my spare beacon batteries for my buddy whose beacon died. I never let my beacon die. More paracord, and then a headlamp because it gets dark when the sun goes down in Alaska. I think that's about it. Oh yeah, GPS. How many people ride with GPSs? You? Yeah, GPSs are great. I've gotten out of some pretty nasty flat light situations with GPS. Should be, oh yeah, and here we got this is my old inReach. And the inclinometer, I'll have this up here if you guys want to check it out. But it's got a ball in it, and then you can see it's even got the likelihood of the avalanche based on the slope angle. This is 1 meet, a lot of Snickers bars. Yeah, flares are a good one. That's a great idea. So I had, one of the last classes I had, one of the special forces guys from Black Rapids training camp showed up, and he had some really interesting things to say about signaling a helicopter. He said if you're carrying like flares or smoke or anything like that, make sure, or glow sticks, he said make sure it's not green, because if they're searching at night, they have night vision goggles on and they can't see green stuff. That blocks out all the green stuff. So you want red. And what he recommended for snow machiners is that you carry a red glow stick, and then he said the best way that you signal a helicopter coming in is you stick that glow stick on like a 3 or 4 foot long piece of rope, and then you swing it above your head like this. He says they can see that in their night vision goggles from miles away, just a glow stick. So for search and rescue, you want to leave a trip plan with somebody. Leave it. I always left it with my parents and told them, hey, I'm going out. I'll be on the going in the Chugach, going to be on the Tanzania Glacier. I'm expected to be back by 10:30 at night. If I'm not back by 10:30, there's probably trouble. And then if I'm not back, these are the people who are around who you can call to go out. These are my friends who didn't go ride with us today. Call them first. and then set up a search plan. Try to contact me on the inReach. Panic is your number one enemy when you get in a situation out there. You need to keep everybody calm, kind of have a leader who takes charge and figures out, makes a plan, and then support the leader. Make sure that they're doing the right thing, get behind them and show support. Keep a good attitude. That goes a long ways when things aren't going so hot. If you're waiting for search and rescue, you need to stay in one spot. Have a signaling device. I talked about the glow stick. Also for the daytime, you can have a compass card with a mirror on it to signal aircraft. And make yourself big and easy to see. Have a flare or some smoke. Lay out some bright clothes or something like that. The plastics are pretty good visibility on a snow machine. Make some good tracks if you're out far in the trees or something. Just run around and make tracks. Those are easy to see. So we're going to set the jet force off here. So a couple important things about the airbags. You need to have all your straps buckled for this to work right. And that includes the one that goes through your legs. This is a tester bag, so it doesn't have the one that goes through your legs. But the reason that you have the leg strap is so that when you get caught in an avalanche, I'm going to lift up on this. When this gets lifted up, that strap is going to go right underneath your chin, and this is buoyant. And then that gets all sucked up around your neck and makes it even harder to breathe than when you're under the snow. So you got the trigger right here. On this one, you're going to hold it down till it makes some noises. So that's the fan starting up, and then it gave you the battery light. The blue is the battery light. And pull it when you're ready. Yank it real hard. Yank it. So this airbag is going to blow up like this, and then the fan's going to kick back on. And the other advantage to this system is that if you do puncture it as you're going through the debris, it's going to stay inflated because the fan is still putting positive pressure. With the air canister, you just get one shot. If you get a tear, it's going to start to lose the air. I do know there has been some stuff where if you go through the ice, it's not a good idea to inflate one of those because that will put you face down. If you go into the ice and you inflate your airbag, you're going to end up head down in the water. That's the only thing I know about that. So, in the avalanche world, we talk about these red flags. These red flags are some really basic signs in the snow that you can look at that can help you gauge the avalanche danger, help you gauge what's going on in the snowpack, if the snowpack is going to be conducive to produce an avalanche, or if you're dealing with a stable snowpack. The first red flag I want to talk about is shooting cracks. That includes cracking or collapsing and wumping of the snowpack. You talked about the whole snowpack just settled. Huge red flag. Yeah, if you pull up, everybody comes to stop, and you feel your buddy come up next to you, and it just goes woof. That is not a good sign. That means the hard layer is collapsing on top of the weak, softer layer below it. That's what's happening there. And essentially, you just triggered an avalanche. The only reason that it didn't actually slide is because the slope angle is not steep enough. But if you get that whomp on a 30-degree slope, you can guarantee that that's going to be an avalanche. So you got cracking or collapsing in the snowpack, and then also hollow drum-like sounds in the snow. Have you ever stepped off your snow machine? You can just like boom, boom, boom. You can hear it like vibrating around. That means you're on top of a really hard wind slab, and that there's hollow space underneath that wind slab. And that's basically just waiting for enough weight or enough energy to compress that, and then that's gonna slide out. So if you're on hollow sounding snow, you need to have your eyes wide open for those wind-loaded slopes and the wind-loaded pockets that I was talking about. Another one that I look for when I go out is recent avalanches. Has there been avalanche activity in the past couple days? And if there has, look at the slope angle, the aspect, if it's wind slab, if it's storm snow. What are we looking at in this picture? Which direction was the wind blowing? Yeah, kind of left to right, kind of over the ridge tops. You can see the cornice over there. So this is another wind slab avalanche that we're talking about that happened on that pillow that is always below cornices down there. Another red flag is heavy snowfall. or rain in the past 48 hours. Avalanches are often triggered the first clear day after storm, and just because it's sunny does not mean it's safe. So the good thing about storm snow is that it's common for the avalanche problems in storm snow to settle out, we call it, or heal up within 48 hours. So there is a good rule of thumb for this one, and that's you wait 48 hours after a big storm before you get on avalanche slopes. Then you got warming or rapidly increasing temperatures, and that's what I was talking about earlier when you get the rain on top of the snow. Anything that makes wet, sloppy snow on top, or even just a little bit wet, if it's good snowball snow, that can be enough sometimes to create warm snow problems. And then your persistent weak layer. These are pretty much impossible to detect without digging a snow pit, which is really unfortunate in the Alaska Range, especially if you're on the snow machine. But kind of the best way to hear about it is through word of mouth. If you hear if you hear there's a persistent weak layer developing, either through the observation page or Facebook or wherever, that's something to take very seriously, because deep persistent weak layers, they're really hard to trigger, and when they trigger, they go huge, huge, huge. They're like gonna bury you super deep. And you can't really detect them by looking at naturals, you can't really detect them looking at any of the other red flags. All right, so to review, we got new snow. How long do you wait after a big storm? Snow 2 feet, how long should you wait?
48 hours.
48 hours, that's a good rule. What do you do if you see recent avalanches or recent natural avalanches? Yeah, stay away from the slopes. Note what are you gonna look at as far as the aspect? Yeah, if there's less sun, so like, are all these avalanches happening on north shaded slopes? Are they happening on the south sunny slopes? And then you can ride according to that. Look for collapsing or cracking. Can someone give me a summary on what that might mean? Yeah, it's getting ready. That's a good way to put it. How about a temperature increase or decrease? Particularly an increase.
I think the increase would be more dangerous than the decrease.
It is. The temperature increase is a lot more dangerous.
Makes it heavier.
What you're looking at, so when you see a temperature decrease, especially in the Alaska Range, when it goes below zero for a couple days, what it does is it's called the snow facets on the surface, which means it like dries out and it loses a lot of its structure, and it's kind of making like sugar snow, when you dig your hand through sugar snow. So it's developing a weak layer for the next snowfall. So if you have in the Alaska Range, if it's like between 0 and 10 degrees for like a week, you can count on that faceting, and then you get a heat, and then it warms up, 25 degrees, and you get 3 feet of snow. I would bet that there's going to be avalanches running on that faceted layer that develop during the cold period. Strong winds are going to be actively loading a slope. What's particularly important when you're looking at wind? Yeah, aspect is going to be everything when you're dealing with wind. So if you have the northerly outflow winds, which slopes are going to be loading up? What are you going to be avoiding especially? The winds, coming out of the north. Exactly, loading up on the south side. And then persistent weak layer. Not a lot you can do about a persistent weak layer. Take another class so you can dig some snow pits, and then you can get somewhere with a persistent weak layer. So then it's one thing to notice these red flags and see them out there. It's a whole other thing to communicate what you're seeing and talk about how you want to actually change your plan. So if you see, say you see cracking in the snow, what are you going to do?
I would go back somewhere else.
Yeah, so are you going to radio your buddies? Or yeah, so it's real common for, so if you're riding in line, only the first person in line is going to see all those shooting cracks. And I've had this where I'm riding first in line and I'm like, oh man, we're seeing some shooting cracks. I want to keep my slope angle down here. I'm like watching the slopes that are around me and I'm really on edge, and then all of a sudden my buddy behind me just takes off on a high mark and I'm like, whoa, what are we doing here? And it's because I didn't radio back and I didn't say, hey, I'm seeing shooting cracks. I'm on edge here. I think we're in some high avalanche danger. So it's really important to communicate that with your riding group. When I was younger, I was involved in quite a few avalanches per year. And then I started getting involved in avalanche education. I decided I needed to learn more about these things or I was going to get into some serious trouble. So I started taking classes, and the number of avalanches I've been involved in has really decreased. When I set camps up, I always make sure that we have a out so that we can get out. You know, the trail out is going to be relatively safe going out in a storm. And that happened to us. We got stormed in on a glacier out of Valdez, and it snowed 8 feet on us, and we had to get out, and it was we couldn't ride during the day because the light was too flat. So after like just dying, digging sleds out in the snow, we decided we would have to ride at night, because then you could have your headlamp on, because your headlights instantly got covered with snow. So we rode with headlamps on, and then you could see definition with your headlamp. It took us 28 hours to go 16 miles. With like summits, and it was a long night. So it's any slope over 30 degrees, no matter how big it is. And this is really key. The human factor is what I really focus on when I pick my riding partners, especially if I'm going to go deep, go on a camping trip, go into really big terrain. I'm going to go with people who are, number one, can communicate well, number two, recognize avalanche risk, crevasse risk, and all that. And then number three are good riders. That comes after. It's way better to ride with people who are going to keep it safe and going to come home at the end of the day. Is how the weather influences your decision making. So when it's dark, when it's cold, when you're hungry, you're going to make hasty decisions, and they're not going to be nearly as good as if it's like bright, sunny, everybody's having a ball. So you need to account for that when you're making these decisions. Look at your riding partner, and take into account, have they been drinking water today? How many snacks have they had today? Are they cranky? Are they really tired? Have they been getting stuck all day and you haven't? Are they like wasted compared to exhausted from digging themselves out of the hole? That is a huge factor. Be patient with the weather and work with the weather. Don't work against it. Yeah, that's the best way to deal with flat light, is just wait till it gets dark. Yeah, your headlights work great.
When it's dark, your flat light's gone. Now it's just dark. Now nice time to get it on.
Yeah. So when I look at a weather forecast and I'm planning a day, I always look at the bottom line. Is it improving or degrading? Weather sources, we got the National Weather Service, FAA cameras. I use this NOAA Weather Android app. It's not on Apple. Iraq just put a new weather station out up on the kind of up by Rainbow Basin, a little farther up the valley from Rainbow Basin. You can access that online. This portal.aos.org is really great. It has all the FAA cameras, the DOT cameras, the SNOTEL sites, everything is on that website. AlaskaSnow.org observations is pretty good. The observations haven't been doing very good. Iraq, Alaska has an Instagram, and we've been doing this hashtag Iraq, Alaska. That's picking up some good traction. It's a really good idea to follow that to get some good snow information, what's going on. And it's really helpful when you guys post and you guys share, do those hashtags, because then all of us can see the snow conditions, especially if you see something bad, if you see something good, see some red flags, post it and tag it so that everybody can see that. So terrain traps, we talked about terrain traps a little bit earlier on. We had gullies, mentioned gullies are terrain traps. What are some other terrain traps? How about where the slope goes from real steep to real flat? That's a good one, because if you get an avalanche up here, it's all going to pile up into one big pile down there, instead of if you have a gradual, like a good run out. We always talk about a good run out. That way the snow is going to come down, it's going to fan out. That slope that we had that big avalanche on, something that really surprised me about that is I had considered that to be a really good run out, and that it's a gentle run out slope and the debris should fan out. The debris is still stacked up to, it was over 10 feet deep in a lot of places. So we got cliffs, gullies, exposed rock or sharks. If you get drug over rocks in an avalanche, that's a really good way to get messed up. Trees, get strained through trees. It's really going to hurt a lot. It's going to puncture your airbag. Crevasses and berg runs are a big one to be aware of in Alaska. And then bodies of water also. If you got avalanche slope coming onto a lake, boom, if an avalanche comes down there, it's going to take the ice out, and then you're going to have somebody in the icy, slushy water. So one of the biggest things you can do on a snow machine is keep one person on the slope at a time. We talked about briefly about multiple burials. It is extremely hard to figure out multiple burial scenarios. The best way to do that is only have one person on an avalanche slope at a time. It's fairly easy to do if your group is all on board with it. You have one person at the bottom, or you have the group at the bottom of the slope out of the run out, and then you have one person at a time going up on the slope to hit it, one at a time. And then that way everybody has eyes on them also. In a big group, always keep a buddy system so you can keep track of everybody. And then one thing that I like to do when I go riding is have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. That's really helped me out a lot. If I'm going into a zone that I don't really know what the avalanche danger is going to be, I'm going to have, usually I have an ambitious goal to go, ski or ride a big line, a big face. And I'm going to have a plan B to go ride more moderate terrain with less consequences, and a plan C to go ride in the trees. I'm going to be ready for all that because it's a lot easier when you invest the time to drive down the Alaska range to go to a plan B and go ride in the trees than it is to just go, well, we only have this big ambitious goal today. I guess we'll go for it anyways because we're not going to go home today. Get the weekend warrior syndrome. So have a plan B where you can go ride some moderate terrain. You can also continue your education looking at, there's a lot of good avalanche books, a lot of good stuff on YouTube. This Avalanche podcast, if you're into podcasts, slide the Avalanche podcast. For snow machining, I'd recommend, there's a video series that the Canadians put out. It's called Throttle Decisions. Really great. It's about 8 or 10 movies that are about 10 to 15 minutes long. Runs through like companion rescue, beacon searching, terrain travel, all that stuff you need to know about. And it's really professional movies. Throttle Decisions. Yep. On the Canadian Avalanche Center website. Get a beacon in your hand and actually do a beacon search. I try to do beacon searches 3 or 4 times a year where I'm actually hands-on in the snow finding a beacon, because it's amazing how you kind of lose, especially your fine search skills. The fine search is the hardest beacon searching skill. That one, you can really save a lot of time if you're good with the hand search. Figure out how to do multiple burials. There's a lot more to learn about avalanche types and avalanche sizing and when and how these avalanches are going to occur. Learn how to dig a snow pit. They're a pain. I hate digging them. I do a lot of on-the-fly tests, and I really like those. But you can learn a lot from a snow pit. And when you're in a class digging a snow pit, you just learn about the snow structure. And then after you learn that in the snow pit, you can kind of apply that, feel that. When you're riding along, you feel your track scraping on a hard surface. You can go, okay, that's a bed surface. That was from this weather event. And then that's useful information. You don't always have to dig a pit all the time. There's a lot you can do if you kind of understand the layers and how they set up. Learn on-the-fly snow tests. Real quick, one of the ones that we do is when you're going into a zone, find the small slopes, small non-consequential slopes, and you just cut it. First you do a high mark up them, boom, that's not a lot of pressure on the slope. Then you can come down, brake on them, that's a little bit more pressure on the slope, and then cut a side hill across these small slopes. And they're big enough where if they slide, you're going to be okay, it's not a big deal, and then you get a good idea of the avalanche danger. And you got to remember that the avalanche danger varies with aspect and elevation. As you move higher up, you're going to get into deeper snow, more wind loading, all that type of stuff. So there's an art to that, and you got to develop that. The best way to do it is go out with people who've done it a lot. You can learn more about deep slabs. There's a lot more with the human factor, how to communicate, and good risk management techniques. So get the gear, get beacon shovel to probe. You took the first step, got some good training. Get the forecast. Unfortunately, we don't have forecasts here. You can get the weather forecast, get the picture, kind of get an idea of what the avalanche problem might be before you go out there, and then get out of harm's way. Make your decisions according to what you see. I would highly recommend some medical training because if you have an avalanche accident or a snow machine accident, you're going to have to deal with some medical issues. Find a mentor, develop savvy riding groups. I think that is huge. Ride with people who also care about avalanche safety. And submit observations to alaskasnow.org and that hashtag. That helps a lot. I just checked this course schedule. There's only one snow machine in level 1 this year that's on the schedule so far. That's on AlaskaAvalanche.org. That's the Alaska Avalanche School down out of Anchorage. They do a lot of really good instruction. That's going to be January 31st to February 2nd down in Turnagain Pass. I'm pretty disappointed to see that that's the only snow machine course on the schedule for this year. But you guys can help that. If you demand these courses, they're going to come up, talk with the dealerships, talk with anybody you can, try and get these classes together. It's well worth your time. And then I was also talking with Logan Wicked today about a potential 3-day course in March down out of Summit. So keep your ears open for that. I think that might develop. He's got some good energy going behind that, and he's got somebody who wants to foot the bill for bringing professional instructors out on their own snow machines that just cost a lot of money for guys to come out, ride their own snow machines, stay somewhere. So keep your ears open for that. I think something's going to happen with that this year.